So this is why it's getting wider. So trafficking is international, child trafficking, comes under child abuse now, or guidelines. Online abuse is without borders. It can be cited anywhere and reach children anywhere. Issue about institutionalized abuse that we're hearing about, the establishment, celebrities, institutional, church, etc., particularly child sexual abuse. But a lot of the police and criminal work is child sexual abuse, but it's unusual to have sexual abuse without attendant physical abuse, psychological abuse, all sorts of other. So that becomes the focus, but remember, it's likely to include more than one type. Cultural issues, that's FGM, isn't it? I'm getting dyslexic too. Okay, I must come to you. Female genital mutilation is now incorporated in the female genital mutilation is now incorporated in the guidelines in the UK. Witch children that are labelled as witches, child beggars, etc. All this is now included in child abuse, especially internationally, but it also affects us in the UK. And then familial abuse is the more well-known one, but of that, neglect is the one that's coming up as rising and not being well observed or reported. Interventions need to be multi-agency because this is getting so complex and wide scales. So you need coordinated policy cooperation, resources, interagency working, local resources. So it goes at every level around the child. So I'm not reading these out, they're quite nice, but the educator, he said, is one maybe. And then the scope in terms of the impacts, well, is well known about the impacts on mental health, shorter and longer term. This is just from my data, but it's similar to others. Adolescents who've had just one of these experiences have 5 times higher clinical disorder rates across a range of disorders. Adults have 3 times higher, and actually we've been looking at older age, and it extends there too. Child abuse has impacts on longer-term physical health and mortality. So they're now looking at it as an early contributor to diabetes and coronary heart disease, and people die younger. So it's getting just more cheerful as I go on. And child abuse has impacts on social and personal problems, etc. And then uncovering the past. So not only are we burdened at the moment with knowing about ongoing cases that hit the headlines, children that die in their parents' care or other things, including institutional, like the Robin case and all those where there's gangs preying on children in residential care. But we've got the past ones that are coming forward. Savile and the Yew Tree inquiry opened up the whole area around celebrity and others, where it was sort of embedded really within certain activities, certain domains, institutional church abuse, and then the state-sponsored, the Australian deportees. 1970s, don't know the numbers, but large numbers of British children went by ship to Australia, purportedly orphans, but many of them weren't. The state sanctioned, they thought it'd be cheaper to look after in Australia. When they got there, they were either used for forced labour or a lot were abused, and a lot were in church organisations. Speaking about Barnabas, I'm surprised they haven't changed their name. It's a really big deal in Australia. They're really trying to deal with this, but the ICSA inquiry has opened this up in terms of compensation. And with one social worker in Nottingham, we found this out, Margaret Humphreys. About it as well. So the ICSA inquiry is the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that's ongoing, had a shaky start, but is both inquiring into these abuses and collecting data and giving out money for research, of which CATS and FPS have benefited. What are the models in how abuse affects children? Dose effects are really the sort of strongest model at the moment. That is, the more neglect and abuse, or the more types you experience in childhood, the more likely you are to have problem outcomes, mental health and others. But I think specificity effects are also interesting, which is to say, does one type of experience lead to one type of disorder or effect? That's looked at less, but I think that's important for treatment. Longer term effects, some effects occur later in life, so domestic violence or other things that might happen later. Excuse me, and then vulnerability mediators, damage functioning. So I like to look at attachment, but there are others, including biological factors. These are dose effects, so you just see the number of types of abuse, the higher the rates of disorder, and here you've got depression, anxiety, self-harm, but also substance abuse and conduct disorder. It works for all of them. This works every time. Obviously, Politi and others in the US who've been looking at the adverse childhood experiences have done large studies of this. Why does that matter? Well, if you are intervening and you reduce even one of the types of abuse and stop it happening, you will reduce the amount of disorder that happens. The other reason why it matters is practitioners don't necessarily assess all the abuses that are going on, so they don't know the full risk. So you might say, well, the physical abuse is really obvious, we'll go for that, and that goes to the family court, etc. But if there's neglect, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, other things, the risk is of a different order, as you can see. Specific effects, this is in our data, we've shown some differences in where the maltreatment comes from in terms of the type of disorder, and this holds across gender, it's not gender. So the mother's maltreatment seems to relate more to depression and the father's to substance abuse. This is in 200 mother adolescent dyads in the community. Intergenerationally, you get abuse recurring in the next generation of the children. So this is mother dyads, mother's neglect and abuse, and then whether the offspring have neglect and abuse. The interesting thing is there's no direct link. So if the mother's been abused, it does not mean her offspring will be abused, so you can't say that. However, her recurrent depression has an impact, and so does her vulnerability, which we now look at in terms of attachment, but there can be other vulnerabilities, and then that leads to disorder. So some of the contemporary issues, what are the intervention barriers? Well, when it's online or online harms, you need a lot of technological sophistication in the police force and in the methods of determining. And of course, here we're not just talking about grooming online sexual abuse, there's distribution of images and live streaming of abuse, etc. The police, the high-tech crime units can do forensic work on laptops to find hand images and history of online grooming behaviour, but and they've got a huge backlog, and there are many high-tech crime units in the country, so it's still difficult, even though it can be done. The independent inquiry of child sexual abuse that's going on, there was obstacles to its progress. If you remember the chair, they kept changing the chair, which made me suspicious of why they didn't want this inquiry to get going, but it's going now, and I think it's doing reasonably well. The whole issue of multiculturalism means that we're effectively sort of importing some new types of abuse, or becoming more aware of them. And also the question of ethnicity has become sometimes a barrier to detecting abuse when social workers and others are too sensitive to cultural issues and don't want to challenge parents because of their ethnicity. And that's come out in various of the reports. Issues around identifying abuse, secrecy issues, still secrecy, still stigma. Neglect is being highlighted as something that's not being tackled well enough. Children not believed. This thing about teenage lifestyle came up in the Rotherham case, I think, or one of the institute residential abuse cases, where the social worker said, well, that's just a lifestyle choice, which was to go out late at night with these gangs of men that they got abused, and they said, well, it's their choice really, and it's like, no, not really. Choose the animals. So some legal and policy blockages, well, because of international initiatives, that's generally gone quite well. The EU have done a lot on online grooming and harms online, and I hope that will still continue because we've benefited from EU funds for that. They've got policies that go right across the 28 countries. issues around professional demoralisation, the staff shortage in custody services at the moment because of the austerity. I spoke to the CEO of St Christopher's Fellowship yesterday, and he said they told me austerity has stopped, but nothing else has happened. There's no more funds, no more plans for them at the moment. Follow-up to EI evaluation, that's early intervention. So one of the big things that came in the last years was the idea of, sort of on a nationwide basis, putting extra enrichment into very young children to aid their development and compensate for any problems around poverty or maltreatment. So these are the really good multipliers. Children's centres attached to schools, a lot of work going on, and big evaluation of it, which was very successful 10 years later. It's all stopped, it's all stopping. And I should be moaning children's services like my daughter, who is a secondary in school, but it's the research that gets me that they've set up all this prospective study. And it will stop because well, it won't necessarily stop, but at the moment it's threatened, shall we say. If somebody does pick it up and see what happens to those children when they're 25, etc. So rollout of interventions are threatened generally, and we know that mental health is not well funded anyway, but these children's centres closures and pressures on teachers. An awful lot of these interventions are in school, which means that teachers now have to educate and safeguard, which they will do, but it's tough to do. Positives, more abuse is recognised internationally and the rights of the child are generally accepted. Public awareness is greater, people know what abuse is and more about it. Policy awareness is greater, and rates of abuse are declining in the UK, except neglect and emotional abuse is associated. Many or most children are resilient. So although we have high odds ratios in relation to disorder, it's still not everybody, it's still not the majority of them. Identification and interventions in school have been found to be positive. Parenting classes are widely available nationally, and the child helplines are widely used. And, these are the ones Mr. Ramsey started. They're international now, these helplines are really working. So thinking of children at Christmas, I'm trying to get a bit more positive here with this I mean, Christmas is about children as much as anything, but we know from NSPC, public, stuff they put out on TV that children are particularly at risk. But I quite like this quote from Korczak: "The school should be the forge upon which the most sacred of codes are cast. They should call the loudest for human rights, to condemn most strongly and utterly that which is working life." This is for educators, but I think that should include universities. Thank you for your attention. Sorry?
Was that bit interesting?
It was, I got that. Yeah.
Does anyone have to come?
Thank you, that was really great. I just wanted to make a comment that in a 1999 degree in psychology, sexual abuse was not mentioned once. Child abuse was not mentioned at all.
Yeah.
And then when I worked in psychiatry, when I was trained as a psychotherapist, voila, all the women in the ward that I was working with had been sexually abused. Clearly not a coincidence. And there have been some studies, but not many. I mean, it's just amazing how we've come on within this. Well, hallelujah. But
Yeah, well, I started my career looking at loss of mother. That was what I did my PhD in.
loss of mother.
Yeah, what's the effect of losing a mother in childhood on later development? And of course, when you went into the stories, it was all about subsequent neglect, problem care, multiple change of households, etc. And so I was looking at that, and then the physical abuse came into the stories, so I had that in, and then I actually worked with Suzanne Aber, who was looking at rape and issues, and I thought, well, she put sexual abuse in there, and just extended the whole, and then psychological abuse was later. But I had to battle with my boss, George Brown, to publish on sexual abuse. He said, we don't publish on that sort of thing. And although it wasn't the first time it had been mentioned in the area, it was the first time it was published in the psychiatric journal. So, and one of the reviewers didn't believe the odds ratio. He said, this doesn't seem possible to me, but replicate it every time. So, I think it was believed that it had an impact, but it was a very tiny proportion of children who were sort of there, not here. And what's happened is it's become more obvious that it can happen all the time.
What year was that you were talking about, George?
I'm just trying to remember.
70s.
No, it was a bit later, it was early 80s, yeah.
Very much really interesting topic. I just was thinking you were presenting about a volunteer center called the Maitri. It's a suicide respite center
Yes.
for people who are at risk of suicide. The kind of narrative, so when I talk to people at risk of suicide, the kind of narrative that I'm noticing is kind of the most constant factor so far has been actually child abuse of different kinds of violence.
Yeah.
And then service and farming actually quite in a young age, out of 12, 13, and then later in life are very suicidal. So I'm noticing this pattern now. I'm not researching this at all. I was, but I'm interested about the stories further. In your own work or work you're familiar with, have you noticed some of this from the relationship with the child abuse, neglect, and self-harming? So harm and suicide.
Yeah, self-harm and suicide, and it relates particularly where you've got psychological abuse. That's the ones that have the strongest relationship to suicidal behaviour. What else? And to unexpectedly role reversal. So when you're interviewing and collecting stories, you can divide the narrative up in lots of ways. And when we were looking in there, we found a group of children who had to take over responsibility for the household. Young carers are sometimes called we put role reversal, and it can be both emotional and practical work they have to do, but they kind of lose a childhood because they're being adults in the household, right? And we ran, an analysis looking at the odds ratios to self-harm, and the highest was for role reversal, and it was 11. I don't think you get numbers like that. And I think we're thinking of is to do with poor emotional regulation, that these kids had to look after others all the time. When they're stressed out, they just don't know how to manage that, and there's nobody there to sort of soothe them. And the interesting thing in social services is that young carers are thought to be a good thing, or at least they are praised for doing that. They're sometimes keeping the family going, and that there is respite for them, but I don't think anybody's seen it as maltreatment. So yes, but I can send you some stuff after. So yeah.
There's just one more question from Mandy, and then I think we'll wrap up and have lunch.
What's the downside of widening the definition of child abuse? Because I think in one obvious one, which is, stretching resources further and therefore being, taking those resources away from real serious cases.
I think it does stretch resources. It also stretches things like training, identification, assessment, all the rest of it. I wouldn't say they're necessarily less serious. It depends, I suppose, on the level. So if you think of female genital mutilation, which comes out in as a cultural issue, but is physically and emotionally harming. Don't really know the numbers, but that would be something that you would need to deal with. I think online grooming, it depends on where it's got to. So the groom behaviour is more like psychological abuse, if you like, but then there is offline contact abuse. So the answer to that, it does stretch resources, but I think we just have to think a bit more widely. And of course, different services tend to take a different line. So really, sexual abuse and the online sexual abuse is police matter. Familial is social work, and I suspect some gets lost in the middle. But I think we've just got to think sort of pan-Europe or pan. I think we've just got to get some of the good practice out further. Yeah, but less money, more abuse. Right?
I suddenly, the slide just before this,
Yeah.
I suddenly made me realise what your the festive story was, which is that clearly you need to add extended perinatal periods in unstable and unsanitary conditions. It's terrible.
Yeah, we didn't do, yeah. Right, gotcha. I'll do any instructions about that.
Dig in, it's getting
Dig in.
on.
All right.